You can fool all the people some of the time, and some of the people all of the time, but you cannot fool all the people all the time. Abraham Lincoln said that. Good afternoon, I am MD, and this is the Fourth Branch program. Today we are going to continue our conversation on trade war with China. I would like to remind you first that we will continue later on this afternoon our conversation of the two most important topics that are currently in the news, which is the Brett Kavanaugh case as well as declassification of top secret government by the President of the United States. But now this is the discussion on the trade war with China. The question remains as to why does the United States engage in a trade war with China? Who stands to benefit? And what is the point of having a trade war? This is not to say that we are not aware of problems having trades with China. Of course we do. And China is not the only country we have trade deficit with. The most difficult part of solving any problem is the understanding of the problem. And the worst part is to look where the problem is not. In other words, trying to solve a problem which does not exist. In the world of commerce, way before the Industrial Revolution, there were always exchanges between various parties. Of course, before we even mankind even had the opportunity to travel great distances, exchanges between communities, between groups, were always something that have somehow helped to preserve the human species. For instance, if you grow potato and I grow tomato, and I have a need for your potato and you may have a need for my tomato, there was no exchange of money and there was no currency at that time. So I would give you some of my tomato and you would give me some of your potato. And that was a system of exchange. And even then, there was a way to weigh the pros and the cons of how many tomatoes do I give you and to how many potatoes. Now, let's assume for sake of conversation that you actually saw an individual who liked tomato and I happen to grow tomato. But I am not really a potato eater. I do eat it on occasion. And I also would eat banana, on occasion plantain, on occasion too, and some other leaves and vegetables. So, in other words, you who like tomato a lot would come to me because that's what I have. You would get a lot of my tomato. But in return, I would not necessarily get a lot of your potato because I don't just like potato. I also like plantain and other veggies. So I would get some of your potato, which in a sense, if you are looking at it from the prism of exchange, you might say that it is not fair because you're getting a lot of my tomato, but I'm not getting a lot of your potato. Now, is it fair to you to get a lot of my tomato and for me not to get a lot of your potato? Now, from a logical perspective, I have no reason to get a lot of your potato because I don't eat that much potato. So why would it be an issue for you? Now, let's reverse the scenario. Let's assume that you do not eat that much tomato, but I do eat a lot of potato. So I would get a lot of potato from you, but you would not get that much potato, that much tomato from me. In other words, you make a lot of business giving me potato, but the other way around is not true. Put differently, there are always going to be imbalances in trades. And it depends on the level of consumption of one party of some item versus another. Now, the example I just gave you is actually the whole point of the argument which has started the trade war with China. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back to further the discussion on the trade war with China. You are on the Fourth Branch program, and I am MD.
Your home. Find everything you need and more at wayfair.com today.
Hello again. I am MD, and of course, this is the Fourth Branch Project. We are talking about trade deficit. Donald Trump, of course, makes it the most important a part of his campaign during the 2016 to get the people that were pushed out of a job because as the economy, as time goes by, of course, it has always happened in history that as more and more technology is advancing, the people who were doing manual jobs are being replaced by technology, by robot, by computers, and so on. So those people are being pushed not only without a job, but there is almost no hope that those people will get a job anytime soon. And the reason for that, obviously, is because those jobs that are gone, for instance, there was a time a car would be built mostly by a human being. All the parts, it would take really a huge amount of time for a car to be built because most of the making of the car was manual. But as technology advances and evolves, then now it becomes easier for most intricate parts of the car are actually assembled by robotic arm. and the humans are there to really fine-tune and put little pieces here and there, and of course guide the robot in the assembly line. Now, despite that, people who lose their job do not get involved in trying to understand why they lose the job and whether they should try to upgrade their skills in order to get a different job. So they spend most of the time actually being miserable, looking for a job in the same area, or simply completely give up. And at the time that the 2016 election was in full-fledged, there were across the country quite a few of those people who wanted someone to tell them, someone to put the blame on somebody and to say that I can change all that. Now, I don't know whether Donald Trump believed what he was telling those people, but I also don't know whether he really believed that there was something that he could do. Regardless which way it goes, that's what he used, and he was elected president of the United States to help all those people. But one aspect of what he was saying, that's that aspect that I want to address now. One aspect he was saying, and he keeps saying it even as of today, is the trade deficit. Now, we will address just the China trade deficit, but in all fairness, the conversation will apply to any other country, and not just with the United States, but it could be between China and Japan, between China and a country in Europe. So the same principle will work. Now, trade deficit, what does that mean? First of all, what is trade? Now, trade is today it has pretty much, it can be used almost as a synonym of exchange. If we go back to maybe 100 years ago, an exchange would be somewhat different from a trade. But today, I believe that those two terms can be used interchangeably. But what is a trade? Well, first of all, there have to be two parties, at least two parties, in order to have a trade. Now, in this case, we're talking the United States versus China. Now, each country has goods and services that they have in surplus. What I mean by surplus, I mean that they have enough for to be consumed domestically and to also be exported as trade in commerce. So that is true for China, and that is also true for the United States. So in the process of trade, there was never a time, and if it were to happen, it would be just by sheer coincidence. There was never a time that the two parties that are doing the exchange will have an equal exchange, an equal trade. Now, the most simplistic way to explain is to say that if we take China with United States, we say that United States buy $1 billion of goods, products, services from China, and in return, China buys $1 billion worth of goods, products, and services from United States. That would be what you would call, or Trump would call, a fair trade and equitable trade. Now, it doesn't have to be exactly the same amount, but you get the gist. Now, when we talk about trade deficit, what that means is one party buys more from the other party than they sell to the other party. Now, as you see on the screen, what that means is, for instance, that US, in that example, that is a very simplistic example. US buy for not only a simplistic example, but that's just an example. It has nothing to do with what is actually going on between US and China. And those numbers are random numbers that I took to illustrate the topic in this conversation. Now, a trade deficit will occur in the example that I put on the screen. United States buy for $5 billion from China and sell $1 billion of goods, product, and services to China. Now, of course, needless to say, the opposite is also true. That's China buys $1 billion of product, goods, and services from the United States and sell $5 billion of goods, product, and services to the United States. In other words, the United States would have a trade deficit of $4 billion. Now, that's what a trade deficit is. Now, in the first example that I gave about $1 billion, let's just say it was just shy of $100 or so, then the trade deficit would have been $100. Now, in this example between the United States and China, where United States buys from China $5 billion worth of goods, product, and services, and only sell $1 billion of such to China, the trade deficit is $4 billion. That sounds bad, doesn't it? Is it? Well, now let's try to figure out how bad that is and why Mr. Trump gets hung up so much on trade deficit. What does it do to the country? How bad is it for the country? Now, you have to pay attention and follow me closely in this example, because it's a lack of understanding of trade deficit that make it sound that it is so bad that it has to be fixed, because otherwise China is taking advantage of the United States. Let's say, for sake of conversation, we're going to bring the number down a little bit so that we can illustrate exactly the issue with the trade deficit. Let's say, for sake of conversation, that there is an increase in the population in the United States. Let's increase it by 10 million. And let's also assume, for sake of argument, that we're not going to evaluate the reason behind it, but we're just going to say that, for sake of argument, that people wake up in the United States and they want beef from China. They want beef, a lot of beef. That's what they want to eat. There is not enough in the United States, so the United States imports beef from China. Now, because of the increase in population and the increase in demand for beef, obviously China is making a lot of money in trade, because China is selling a lot of beef to the United States. But at the same time, let's keep everything in China the way it is today. In other words, there is no change in population, there is no change in taste, there is no change in demand. So what ends up happening, a lot of people in the United States are making demand for something, for goods that the United States buy from China, but there is no increase in demand from China. That will automatically create a trade deficit. But first of all, if you're following the logic, there is nothing wrong with that, because if people are demanding more beef and you can get the beef somewhere to supply to your customers, there is nothing wrong with that. But you're not giving money to China without getting if you walk into a store and you just give you simply hand $100 bill to the cashier and walk away without anything, then this is giving your money away. But if you walk into a store and you buy a pair of shoes, a dress, a pair of pants, and it so happened to cost $100, and you give that $100 to the cashier, you get what you bargained for, you get what you went to the store for. You get your dress, you get your pair of shoes, and you pay for it. Now, if we want to make the example a little bit more interesting by saying that you have a store, your own store next door, where you sell whatever you sell, maybe food product, chips, soda, what have you. Now, what it sounds like is as if you're saying that since you go to that store to buy a pair of shoes, to buy dress, now you are demanding that the store that sells dress and shoes must come to buy from your store. Now, there is nothing wrong with having this type of exchange, this type of trade, but also there is nothing that should make it mandatory for the store next door that you just buy your pair of shoes from has to come to your store to buy food, chips or soda or what have you, because they may not eat those kind of stuff, or you may not have anything that they are interested in. In other words, between you, your store, and the store next door, there is a trade deficit. Now, you may look at it as you would like reciprocity. Who wouldn't? But the store next door didn't do anything wrong to you, because you went to the store, you buy a pair of shoes or dress or pair of pants, a shirt, and you pay for it. You walk, case closed. You pay and you get your product. You then give the money to the store. You get something for it. But the discussion that Donald Trump always brings that scare the hell out of people is the fact that it sounds as if China is doing something wrong to the United States. Again, as I mentioned in the example, that it would be nice that as the United States buy from China, China buys from the United States as well. But as simplified for you in the example of the two stores, it doesn't always work that way. It doesn't always work out that way. So what does China do wrong in that example towards the United States. From that perspective, absolutely nothing. Now let's reverse the example. Now let's say that the United States sells product and services that Italy wants, Spain, Germany, UK, but we're selling them the same scenario where there is a demand for a product that the United States has and can sell, but the United States doesn't have the same demand at home for food, for goods, product and services from, let's just say, Germany. Now what's going to happen, there is going to be a trade deficit, but this time it's going to be on the Germany side, because United States is selling more from Germany than the United States is buying from Germany. Now it is, if you're following that logic, nothing that in the second part of the example that the United States would have done wrong to Germany, there is nothing that China is doing wrong to the United States when they sell to the United States. Now this is what the trade deficit is that a country, a party, sells more, party A sells more to party B than party A buys from party B. That's all that the trade deficit is. Now granted, what we're talking about is not just one product, is a group of products. So I gave the example of beef, but it could be beef, goat, fish, what have you, all kind of different products that are coming from China into the United States. Well, of course, it doesn't have to be just one category. It could be several different categories. So I use meat in that case in this example. So from that perspective alone, we're not talking about the monetary aspect where it's a different issue, which we will talk about in another session, but we are talking about a very specific aspect that, for reason that's beyond understanding, that we think that China, when we talk about trade deficit, whether it's China, Canada, European countries, that Trump has had a lot of friction with, and the people who actually support him, because they do not have the understanding how trade works, so they think Trump is right for saying those kind of things. Now again, I'm going to say it, that it would be nice and fair that if you have a store next door where you sell, for instance, food item, and the store neighbor to yours sell clothing item, it would be nice that you decide to buy your clothing from that store, and that store decide to buy food item from you. It would be nice. Now, even in the case where you buy clothing from the store next door, it is a guarantee that's not the only place you're going to buy your clothing, which means you're going to diversify, so to speak. You're going to buy clothing elsewhere. So unless you decide, you go to the store next door and you say that I'm going to be buying clothes from you, but I want you to buy food from me, and if you don't, I'm going to stop buying clothes from you. This is trade war. Who does it benefit? This is what Donald Trump has done. He has engaged in trade war because he's saying that we buy so much from China, but China doesn't buy as much from us. Then that creates a trade deficit. Trade deficit doesn't mean the country is in debt with China. That's not the reason that US is in debt, coincidentally, with China. But that's not the reason, because just like in the example of the store, if you go to the store next door to buy clothing, and the store next door doesn't buy as much from you, there is a trade deficit, but you don't owe the store anything. So the word trade deficit sounds bad because it sounds as if now you owe because there is a deficit, or you're losing, there is a deficit. Now, you could have a trade deficit and owe the store next door if the store next door happened to provide a credit card for you to buy. Now, if the store next door provides a credit card, now you go to the store next door all the time to buy clothes, shoes, etc. But the store next door very rarely come to your place to buy food items, so there is a trade deficit. But now, not only there is that trade deficit, but you also have owe the store next door. But the two are not mutually exclusive. You can have one, which is a trade deficit, without the other, or you can have both. So don't misunderstand the word trade deficit when you're hearing it, because it doesn't mean that we're losing money. That's not what it means. Because if you buy a nice piece of clothes, a nice pair of shoes worth $100, and you pay that $100 for that pair of shoes, but the store next door doesn't come to buy anything from you, you have a trade deficit, but you didn't lose anything. Get that straight. A trade deficit doesn't mean the party lose money. That's not what that means. It's a term, unfortunately, that sends a wrong message to those who may not quite understand the concept of trade. You have a store that sells clothes, clothing, shoes. I have a store that sells food items. I go to buy clothing, shoes from your store, but you never come to buy food item from me. So I have a trade deficit, because everything that I buy from you, let's just say if I were to buy every week $100 worth of clothing from you, then I would say that I have a weekly trade deficit of $100 from your store. But I'm not losing money, because not only I need those items that I purchase, I pay for them, and you provide those items to me. So I didn't lose anything. That should be quite interesting, because of the fact that now that we know what a trade deficit is, we will be talking about why in the world the President of the United States declare war on people, on countries we do business with. What does he wish to accomplish, and whether that's going to help or hurt the United States of America. I'll be right back. In 1996, a small network by the name of Fox News was launched with just 17 million viewers. Today, with over 100 million people watching regularly, Fox has become the greatest threat to our democracy, constantly bombarding the airwaves with false information, distortion of facts, and outright lies, presenting to its audience as news. Fox has created an army of blissful ignorance. According to a recent survey, 82% of Fox viewers are ignorant of facts and the truth. To keep millions of people in ignorance not only prevents democracy from flourishing, but it also clears the path to authoritarianism, to dictatorship. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nothing in all the world is more dangerous than sincere ignorance and conscientious stupidity." Let me finish by saying that democracy cannot survive in an environment where truth and facts do not matter. At Fox, truth and facts do not matter. Indeed, democracy in America is in jeopardy. It is a crisis the country can no longer ignore. Ignorance, they say, is the biggest threat to any democracy. Indeed, it is. Plato, a Greek philosopher born in 427 BC, said that ignorance is the root and stem of all evil. Today, members in the Republican Party wear ignorance as a badge of honor, while the rest of the country watch powerless the destruction of a country which was once the envy of the world. The media is the enemy of the country, said Donald Trump. The Democrat legislators are obstructionists for not going along with everything the president wants. The Department of Justice is biased for investigating corruption in the Trump administration. This is the United States of America. Any question? One answer is located on the People Branch website, link of which is provided below. Donald Trump is wrong to call the media the enemy of the country. I do thank you very much for taking the time to watch Trade War with China. Tomorrow we will take a look at part 3 of the series Trade War with China. We invite you this afternoon at 4 p.m. for a look at declassification of top secret document by the President of the United States. This is the 4th Branch Project. We hope you have a great afternoon.
Jack.